Have you ever looked around a quiet room and wondered what it would feel like if it stayed that way all day? Not lonely, just peaceful, just yours. For many people, especially as we get older, that thought can feel like both a dream and a fear. We've been told for years that living alone is risky, that it means isolation, that it's something to avoid. But what if those ideas are wrong, or at least incomplete? What if living alone in your later years isn't something to fear, but something to embrace? Something that could actually bring back parts of you that got buried over time. Your freedom, your rhythm, even your voice. I know that might sound surprising, especially if you grew up in a time when being surrounded by people was seen as the only way to age well. But the truth is, for many older adults, choosing to live alone has opened the door to a kind of independence, clarity, and joy they didn't even know they were missing. And that's what I want to talk about today. Let's begin with something simple, but incredibly powerful. Control. When you live alone, you get something most of us don't even realize we've given away over the years: full control over your space and your time. That means you decide what happens in your day, from the moment you wake up to the moment your head hits the pillow. You get to eat when you're hungry, not when someone else is. You don't have to explain why you like your living room set up the way it is, or justify why you keep the thermostat at 75. You just live. And that kind of autonomy, no matter how small it sounds, can feel like oxygen after years of caregiving, compromising, or managing a home filled with others' needs. I remember talking to Frank, who's 82 now. He'd been living with his daughter and her husband for 5 years. They all got along fine, but he told me something that stuck with me. He said, "I always felt like I had to ask permission to be myself." He couldn't cook what he liked or watch his favorite shows without feeling like he was disturbing someone. When he finally moved into a modest little apartment nearby, his daughter was nervous. But just a few weeks later, he told her, "This is the first time in years I've felt like me again." That's what control gives you. Not just comfort, but dignity. A sense that you're still the author of your own story. And when the outside world feels more chaotic than ever, that little sanctuary you create for yourself becomes more than just a home. It becomes a reminder, I can still do this. I still know who I am. But it's not just about control. Something else starts to happen in the quiet. When you live alone, a stillness settles in. At first, it might feel unfamiliar, even uncomfortable. But slowly, that quiet becomes something more than silence. It becomes peace. There's a kind of calm that only solitude brings. Without the constant background noise of someone else's movements or moods, you begin to hear yourself again. Your thoughts stop racing. Your memories come to the surface. You feel your emotions instead of brushing them aside. And in that stillness, many people discover something they hadn't felt in years: ease. A gentleness toward themselves. A kind of presence. Margaret, who's 85 now, told me something beautiful after her youngest son moved out. She'd spent decades with a full house. Kids, grandkids, family dinners, constant buzz. And when it all stopped, she panicked. She said, "I didn't know who I was without someone to take care of." But then, something shifted. She started journaling, taking long walks by the lake, even tried meditating, something she used to laugh at. And 6 months in, she told me with a soft smile, "I'm meeting parts of myself I never knew existed. And I like who I'm meeting." That's the quiet gift of solitude. It brings you back to yourself, not in isolation, but in rediscovery. You learn to sit with your thoughts, to soothe your own worries, to entertain yourself without a schedule. And in that process, something unexpected happens. Healing. Not from one specific thing, but from the weight of a life spent rushing past your own needs. And once you feel safe in your own company, the fear of being alone loses its power. Because you realize you are enough. You are not forgotten. You are not invisible. You are here, whole, worthy, still very much alive. And something else changes too. Something many people don't expect. Your relationships. When you live alone, the people you stay in touch with, the ones you call, the ones you visit, the ones you invite into your world, those connections start to shift. They become more intentional. You're not just surrounded by people because they happen to be in your house. You reach out because you want to, and others do the same. Walter, who's 84, shared with me how strange it felt after his wife passed and his children moved out. The house was so quiet. At first, it felt like an echo chamber. But then he began to do something he hadn't done in years. He started calling his old army buddies just to talk. He joined a local book group at the library, wrote letters to his grandchildren. "Funny thing," he said, "I'm alone more, but I feel more connected than I have in decades." That's what happens when connection is a choice, not a routine. It deepens. It becomes more honest. You listen better. You share more openly. You don't speak out of obligation. You speak from the heart. And that kind of communication, the kind that's built on mutual effort, not convenience, has a way of making you feel seen, even when you're miles apart. So if you've ever worried that living alone means being forgotten, let me gently offer a different possibility. Maybe, just maybe, it brings you closer to the people who truly matter. Because when we stop living in reaction to others, we start reaching out with more clarity, more intention, and more love. Now let's talk about something that often goes unnoticed. But once you experience it, you realize how much it changes everything. Your routine. The way your days begin, flow, and end. When you live alone, you're no longer adjusting to someone else's habits or preferences. You get to move at the speed that feels right for you. And that kind of alignment, where your rhythm finally matches your own body and spirit, can bring surprising calm. Think about how many years you may have spent planning around a partner's schedule or making sure the household ran a certain way. Maybe you ate dinner late even when you were hungry early. Maybe you tiptoed in the morning because someone else was still asleep. It's those small shifts we make for others, often without realizing how they accumulate over time. And when those expectations fall away, you begin to rediscover something: your own rhythm. Eleanor, a 80-year-old I once spoke to, told me that for decades, she shaped her life around her husband's preferences. He was a night owl, loved having the TV on late, and always wanted dinner at 8:30. She didn't mind it, not really, but she never questioned it either. After he passed and she found herself living alone, her body naturally began to wake up with the sun. She started taking walks before breakfast, eating earlier, reading more in the quiet evenings, and going to bed before 10. "I feel 10 years younger," she said. "Turns out I was always a morning person. I just never had the space to be one." There's something healing about that kind of self-awareness. It's not just about sleep or meal times, it's about finally giving yourself permission to live the way your body wants to live. And when your days are shaped by your own energy, your own hunger, your own rest, everything starts to feel a little more steady. Digestion improves, sleep deepens, moods lift. Even your sense of purpose becomes clearer because you're not rushing or reacting. You're simply present. And that presence begins to protect your peace in ways you might not expect. You see, for many older adults, living with family, even with the best of intentions, can quietly wear on you. The stress may not always be loud, but it builds. Maybe it's the feeling of being monitored, of having to explain yourself, or tiptoe around conversations just to keep the peace. You may feel like a guest in your own home, even when you're loved. And that feeling, day after day, chips away at your emotional freedom. George, 82, moved in with his daughter's family after a hospital stay. They were kind, generous, and truly wanted to help. But he told me he often felt like he was living on someone else's schedule. "Every time I moved, I felt like I had to ask permission," he said. "I wasn't sick anymore, but I wasn't free either." Eventually, he found a small apartment a few blocks away. Not because he didn't love his family, but because he needed to breathe. He needed room to be himself again. And when I asked him how it felt to live alone, he smiled and said, "Peaceful." Like I can finally hear myself think. That peace matters. It's not selfish. It's not antisocial. It's necessary. Because emotional tension, even when subtle, takes a toll. It can cloud your thoughts, tighten your body, dull your spirit. When you remove the constant pressure to navigate others' moods or unspoken expectations, something remarkable happens. You begin to trust your own instincts again. You stop doubting every little choice. You stop walking on eggshells. And in that quiet, you find space. Not just physical space, but mental and emotional space to rest. It's not about shutting the door on relationships. It's about opening the door to your own well-being. And in that stillness, something else often begins to bloom. Resilience. This is one of the most surprising gifts of living alone in later life. When you start doing more for yourself, whether it's managing your medications, fixing a leaky faucet, or even just making your own schedule, you begin to realize just how capable you still are. You stop assuming you need help with everything. You stop waiting for someone else to take the lead. And with each small success, your confidence builds. I remember Helen, 85, who had never lived alone before her husband passed. She admitted she was terrified at first. Paying bills, calling the plumber, even refilling prescriptions felt overwhelming. But she started keeping a little notebook, writing down every task she completed on her own, no matter how minor. "I just wanted to prove to myself I could do it," she said. That notebook became a kind of victory journal, a daily reminder that she was still strong, still sharp, still entirely capable of steering her own ship. And that's what resilience really is. Not the absence of fear or hardship, but the quiet, steady courage to keep going, to keep growing. Living alone doesn't mean you'll never need help, but it means you don't need permission to take action. You don't have to wait for someone else to fix it. You become your own first responder. And in that process, you discover a kind of strength that can't be given. It has to be earned, lived, and felt. And the beautiful thing, that strength shows up in the way you carry yourself. In the confidence of your voice, the clarity of your choices, and the gentle pride you feel when you say, "Yes, I did that. I handled it." There's something deeply empowering in knowing that even as the world changes, even as your body changes, your spirit is still deeply intact, still active, still leading the way. And when you live alone, that spirit has more space to shine. Sometimes, living alone isn't just about peace or resilience. It's about rediscovery, the kind that gently sneaks up on you in the quiet, in the in-between moments, when no one else is around to shape your day. For many older adults, it becomes the first time in years, maybe decades, that there's room to ask, what do I love? What brings me joy? Not out of duty or habit, but from the inside out. Jack was 81 when his wife passed away. He had spent most of his adult life running a hardware store, waking up early, working long hours, putting food on the table, raising kids, keeping the wheels turning. After retirement, and especially after the house became still, he told me he didn't know what to do with himself. "The silence was loud," he said. "It scared me at first." But then something small happened. One afternoon, he noticed a set of watercolor paints his granddaughter had left behind. On a whim, he tried them. The next day, he tried again. And before long, it became a daily ritual. He didn't paint masterpieces. He didn't plan to show anyone. But he started every morning with color, and with it came something more powerful than he expected, a sense of aliveness. "I didn't even know I liked painting," he told me. "But now it's how I start my day, with something just for me." Living alone creates space for that. You're no longer reacting to other people's needs. You're finally free to follow your own spark, to explore what makes you feel curious or creative or comforted. Whether it's music, gardening, reading, writing, or even just dancing a little in your kitchen, these things aren't small. They're signs that life is still blooming inside you. And sometimes, rediscovery isn't even about something new. Sometimes it's about returning to something old, something you loved once but had to leave behind. An old book that shaped you. A favorite meal only you know how to make just right. A song that takes you back to who you were before the world got so noisy. Living alone lets you reach back and pull those threads forward again. And in doing so, you remember, I'm not just passing time. I'm living with meaning. This kind of life, rooted in freedom, self-trust, quiet confidence, and joy. It's not a backup plan. It's not the path you take because something went wrong. It's a path that stands strong on its own because it reflects who you've become. Someone wise, someone capable, someone with nothing left to prove, but everything still left to experience. And maybe that's what makes this stage of life so quietly beautiful. It's no longer about racing or chasing or climbing. It's about deepening, about presence, about choosing how you want to spend your precious time. You are not missing anything just because your house is quiet. You're not falling behind just because your days look different from someone else's. You're not broken, forgotten, or invisible. You're simply in a season of life that comes with its own kind of beauty, its own kind of wisdom, and its own kind of freedom. Some people might not understand it. That's okay. They don't have to. This life is yours. And it's not just okay to live it on your own terms. It's powerful. When you wake up in your own space, move to your own rhythm, rest in your own silence, and follow your own joy, you are doing something remarkable. You are choosing to live, not out of obligation, not because someone told you how to, but because you've earned the right to design your days. You've earned the right to take up space, to follow your energy, to build a life that fits you. And what you may find, quietly, beautifully, perhaps even surprisingly, is that living alone doesn't mean being alone. It means being with yourself fully. It means creating relationships that are meaningful, not convenient. It means healing old wounds, not by avoiding them, but by giving yourself the time and silence to feel through them. It means waking up and realizing that there is still so much of you left, still curious, still strong, still open to life. And so, if you are living alone right now, or thinking about it, know this: you are not behind. You are not too late. You are not too old to start again. Every single day you choose to show up for yourself, to make your bed, to eat well, to move your body, to sit in peace, is a day you're building a life that honors who you are now, not just who you used to be. And that, more than anything, is what freedom really looks like. As we bring this conversation to a close, I want you to take a deep breath with me. Really. In and out. That breath you just took, that was yours. No one asked for it. No one shaped it. It belonged to you, just like this moment. And maybe that's the quiet truth we've been circling all along. Living alone in old age is not about absence. It's about ownership. Ownership of your space, your time, your thoughts, your peace, and your potential. So much of life, especially in earlier years, is about giving. We give to partners, to children, to work, to obligations. And for many of us, that giving became a habit so deeply rooted, we forgot what it feels like to give back to ourselves. But here you are, in a chapter where that balance begins to shift, where solitude is no longer a punishment, but a portal, an invitation to come home to yourself. You've heard stories today of people like Frank, Margaret, Walter, Eleanor, George, Helen, and Jack. Ordinary people who found something extraordinary in the stillness. Dignity, discovery, confidence, joy. They didn't start with perfect plans or grand awakenings. They started with small steps, a rearranged chair, a morning walk, a quiet meal with music playing softly in the background. They followed those steps until the fear faded, and the fear was replaced by something stronger: trust. Trust in their ability to manage. Trust in their right to rest. Trust in the voice inside them that had waited patiently, sometimes for years, to be heard again. And now, I hope you feel that same voice stirring in you. Because the truth is, you are not waiting for life to happen. You are living it, right now. In every quiet cup of tea you sip alone without explanation. In every task you complete for yourself, however small. In every morning you wake up and say, "This day is mine." Living alone is not the opposite of love. It's not the opposite of meaning or community. In fact, for many, it becomes the foundation that allows all of those things to be stronger, more intentional, more real. It teaches you to stop filling space with noise and start filling it with truth. It teaches you to choose relationships, not just maintain them. It teaches you to value your voice, not over others, but alongside them, as equal, as enough. And maybe most importantly, it teaches you to see yourself again, not as someone winding down, but as someone still unfolding. You've lived enough life to know that it isn't always easy. There will be days of loneliness, yes. Days when you wish someone was sitting across the table. Days when the silence echoes a little too loud. But those moments don't define your story. They are part of it, yes. But so are the moments of deep laughter with a neighbor, of rediscovery in a forgotten hobby, of quiet strength when you handle something you once thought you couldn't. You are not a burden. You are not fading. You are not a chapter that has already been written. You are still the pen in your own hand. And if you're watching this today, I want to thank you, not just for your time, but for your courage, for being open to a different way of thinking about this stage of life, for considering the possibility that living alone doesn't mean being alone, and that solitude might just be the sanctuary you didn't know you needed. If something in this video resonated with you, I'd love to hear it. Please share your thoughts in the comments. What did this bring up for you? Are you already living alone or thinking about it? What have you learned about yourself along the way? Your voice matters, not just to me, but to others in this community who might be walking a similar path. And if you found this video helpful or comforting, I invite you to like it, subscribe to this channel, and turn on the bell icon so you won't miss future content. Every bit of support helps us continue creating videos that encourage, inspire, and uplift people just like you. So here's to you, to your independence, your peace, your rediscovery, and your happiness. You are never too old to start over. You are never too far gone to come back to yourself. And you are never, ever too alone to live a life full of meaning, dignity, and joy. Here's to living well, on your own terms. Thank you for spending this time with me. I'll see you in the next video.